This morning, the Princess of Wales back on the global stage. Kate's first international trip since her cancer recovery, stepping out on her own, a research trip of sorts, learning about a cause she cares deeply about.
Thousands of people have packed the square. People are hanging out the windows, and you can see her right here, meeting some of her littlest fans.
Catherine had endured scrutiny, illness, duty, and years of silent pressure without allowing the monarchy to see her break. But the document placed before her that morning struck somewhere deeper. King Charles had quietly begun the appointment of a new sole trustee to oversee the Crown Legacy Trust, the institution controlling funds intended for Catherine's future royal projects, and he had done it without asking her, warning her, or even including her name in the consultation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine stared at the memorandum while the palace secretary stood rigidly beside the table, waiting for a reaction he feared. The Crown Legacy Trust, a private royal fund supporting charitable work, ceremonial duties, historic archives, and selected properties, had been shaped for years around her priorities. She had met the families behind its grants, reviewed its early years programs, and defended its promises when budgets tightened. Now another man was being placed above it. The secretary swallowed before admitting that Charles had approved Sir Adrian Pembroke as preliminary sole trustee. That position meant one person could control the trust's money, records, property access, and future grants. Catherine read the paragraph twice. Then she looked up, her voice quiet enough to make the silence dangerous. When was I going to be told? William watched her place the pages down with trembling fingers. He had seen her survive public attacks, private fear, and the demands of duty. But this pain was different. Catherine was not mourning a lost title or smaller role. She was confronting the fact that years of loyalty had been treated as optional, and her judgment removed from a decision carrying her name. The shock deepened when she reached the attached powers. Pembroke could redirect funding away from projects she had built, restrict her access to protected royal archives, and approve programs presented as her work without seeking her consent. The appointment had not been announced, but the legal papers were advanced. Only direct intervention could stop it at that moment. Charles believed the process could remain contained until every signature was secured. He assumed formality would make resistance difficult and silence would prevent humiliation. But the memorandum had reached the one person it was designed to bypass. William closed the folder with a sharp, final movement. He told Catherine that the king would explain the decision himself, not through an aide, lawyer, or carefully worded note. Yet before she could face the man who had excluded her, she had to understand why the people closest to the crown had decided that her voice was suddenly expendable. This was never simply a dispute over a trustee. For Charles, the appointment represented control at a moment when his reign felt increasingly dependent on those who would inherit it. For Catherine, it represented something far more personal, whether years of loyalty had earned her genuine trust or merely ceremonial praise. Between them stood William, forced to choose whether protecting his father's authority was still possible when that authority had wounded his wife. Charles felt the monarchy shifting beneath him. The Crown Legacy Trust, a private royal fund created to support selected charities, preserve important records, and finance long-term royal projects, carried part of the late Queen's personal legacy. Whoever controlled it could influence which causes received money, which records remained protected, and which royal figure shaped its future. The king believed that authority had to remain close to him. Catherine understood the trust differently. She had spent years identifying its priorities, meeting families supported by its grants, and protecting programs focused on children, mental health, and the early years of life. She had made quiet promises to people who believed the monarchy would not abandon them when public attention moved elsewhere. Now those promises could be delayed, reduced, or erased by a trustee she had never even met. Catherine sat alone with handwritten notes from earlier meetings spread before her. Every page carried reminders of conversations, commitments, and names she had refused to forget. One project supported parents facing severe postnatal depression. Another helped children living through family breakdown. She suddenly realized that Sir Adrian Pembroke could decide their future without hearing a single word from her. William felt the pressure closing around him. He understood why his father feared losing control, especially as more responsibility moved toward the next generation. Yet the prince could not defend secrecy when that secrecy damaged Catherine's work and reputation. Protecting the king's authority had always mattered to him, but protecting his wife from deliberate exclusion mattered more. Camilla learned the truth through a private conversation with Charles after Catherine received the memorandum. The queen consort had known Pembroke's name for several days, but she had assumed the king had already discussed the appointment with Catherine. When he admitted that no such conversation had happened, she fell silent. Charles saw the shock in her face, and she saw that he had expected obedience to replace consent. The secrecy ran deeper. Pembroke had not emerged from the usual consultation, involving several advisors and royal households. Charles had interviewed him privately at Clarence House, his London residence, with only one senior legal advisor present. William later discovered that the meeting took place 3 weeks earlier, immediately after Catherine challenged a financial proposal before the king. The hidden appointment had created the crisis, but the true fracture began weeks before during one conversation that transformed private disagreement into royal distrust. 3 weeks before Catherine discovered the trustee memorandum, the family gathered at Windsor for what was supposed to be a routine discussion about the late Queen's legacy projects. It ended with Charles feeling challenged, Catherine feeling dismissed, and everyone else understanding that something irreversible had happened. One proposal, one refusal, and one sentence spoken across a polished table became the trigger for everything that followed, and the moment the king began looking for another way around her. Charles opened the meeting with controlled confidence. Catherine sat opposite him with William beside her, while Camilla and several senior advisors listened as the future of the Crown Legacy Trust was placed under review. The trust was the private royal fund supporting selected charities, archives, properties, and long-term projects. Its decisions mattered because families had already built plans around promised support, and because every change carried the late Queen's name. Charles proposed moving part of the annual budget into a wider royal heritage program. That program would protect historic buildings, collections, and ceremonial work, but the transfer would reduce money for several causes closely linked to Catherine. She understood the danger immediately. Projects serving children, parents, and people facing mental health crises could be delayed before they had even begun. Catherine objected without raising her voice. She reminded the room that charities had hired staff, booked services, and made promises based on the funding already discussed. She warned that withdrawing support would not only hurt vulnerable families, it would also damage the monarchy's credibility, because people would believe royal commitments could disappear whenever internal priorities changed. Charles heard something else. He heard resistance. The king believed the final burden rested with him, and Catherine's refusal felt like a challenge made in front of advisors who were watching every word. William tried to calm the exchange, but the future king also made clear that his wife was defending commitments, not attacking the sovereign. Camilla remained silent as the tension hardened. After the advisors left, Charles told Catherine that final responsibility rested with the monarch. She answered with the sentence, "No one forgot." Responsibility without consultation could become control without trust. He stared at her, then removed her briefing notes from the center of the table and placed them to one side. Camilla saw the gesture, and she understood its meaning. Charles acted before the night ended. Through a documented instruction sent to his legal secretary, he ordered a list of candidates for a trustee with independent authority over the fund. Days later, Sir Adrian Pembroke entered Clarence House through a private entrance. Catherine was never told, but William's staff later found his name in a restricted diary entry. Once Catherine understood that the appointment had been born from that Windsor confrontation, her sadness hardened into resolve, and she demanded to hear the truth directly from Charles. The confrontation took place without cameras, courtiers, or prepared statements. Catherine entered the king's private sitting room, carrying the memorandum he never intended her to see. Charles remained standing beside his desk, already aware that secrecy had failed. William stayed near the door but said nothing. Then Catherine placed the file between them and asked the question that stripped away every royal formality. "Why was I removed from a decision made in my name?" Charles answered with the language of protection. He insisted that the appointment remain preliminary, and that Sir Adrian Pembroke had been considered only to shield the trust from family pressure, political interference, and competing royal interests. The draft instrument, meaning the legal document that would formally grant the trustee his powers, had not yet been signed. To the king, that distinction mattered. To Catherine, it changed nothing. Catherine told him the trustee would control money, archives, and programs tied directly to her public work. Those projects carried her reputation, her promises, and the trust of families who believed she would remain accountable for them. Excluding her was not an administrative detail. It was a decision to use her name while denying her a voice. Catherine kept her tone controlled, but the restraint made every word sharper. She said she could have accepted disagreement. She could even have accepted losing the argument at Windsor. What she could not accept was deception. Learning about the appointment from a nervous secretary had left her humiliated inside the institution she had spent years defending. Charles stiffened. He said her refusal at Windsor had made him question whether she could separate personal projects from the broader needs of the crown. William finally stepped forward. The prince warned that questioning Catherine's judgment did not justify hiding a decision from her. He reminded his father that loyalty could not survive if obedience became the only acceptable response. Catherine opened the file again and asked whether Pembroke had been promised complete authority. Charles hesitated. That pause exposed more than any denial could have hidden. He admitted that the draft allowed the trustee to act without approval from either Catherine or William. Camilla entered after hearing the raised voices. The Queen Consort had known about Pembroke, but she had never been told the full scale of his proposed powers. She looked at Charles with open disbelief, and he realized another layer of secrecy had collapsed. Catherine removed her trust briefing book from the table. She told the king she would suspend all involvement until the appointment was withdrawn. Then she left. Her departure ended the confrontation, but it exposed a more dangerous question. Who could stop Charles once the royal machinery had already begun moving? Behind every royal decision lies a machinery designed to make personal choices appear inevitable. By the time Catherine confronted Charles, legal drafts had been prepared, private briefings circulated, and Pembroke's authority carefully defined. Yet the system was not as united as the king believed. Inside the palace, officials were beginning to question whether protecting royal control had crossed into damaging the very people expected to preserve the monarchy after him. Charles had given clear instructions to his private secretary, legal advisor, and financial comptroller. They were to minimize family involvement, preserve sovereign discretion, and ensure the trustee could act without pressure from competing royal households. Sovereign discretion meant the monarch's personal authority to make certain decisions without wider family approval. To the king, that power protected order. To others, it now looked dangerously close to exclusion. The proposal still required several internal signatures before Sir Adrian Pembroke could formally assume control. Royal approval had started the process, but senior officials remained responsible for confirming that the appointment was lawful, workable, and consistent with the trust's purpose. That gave the palace room to delay. It also meant Charles was no longer the only person capable of deciding whether the plan survived. Charles sat alone with Catherine's suspension letter in his hands. He read the final paragraph twice, removed his glasses, and placed them beside the file. The silence lasted longer than he expected. Her absence from the trust was not symbolic. Without her involvement, charities could lose confidence, staff could face confusion, and projects carrying her name could no longer proceed as though nothing had happened. Camilla confronted him privately that evening. The Queen Consort told Charles that Catherine's pain could not be dismissed as resistance to authority. She reminded him that the princess had defended the monarchy through years of pressure and had asked only to be treated as a partner in work she had helped build. He answered with quiet bitterness that every concession now felt like surrendering part of the reign he had waited decades to lead. The resistance inside the palace then became impossible to ignore. The keeper of the private estates, the official responsible for overseeing certain royal properties and private assets, refused to add the required signature until Catherine's legal position was clarified. That single refusal froze the appointment. William uncovered something even more disturbing. After obtaining a copy of the draft instrument, the prince found a clause allowing Pembroke to appoint additional advisors without consulting either him or Catherine. The future king understood at once that the trustee could build an entire circle of power around the trust. Before the palace could contain the dispute, Catherine's suspended engagements began affecting charities and staff. The secret plan had stalled behind palace doors, but her absence soon created a silence the entire royal operation could hear. The first visible consequence was not a statement or a scandal. It was an empty chair. At a scheduled meeting with representatives from 3 children's charities, Catherine's place remained unoccupied, while aides quietly informed guests that the princess had suspended her work with the trust. The room carried on without her, but the purpose had vanished. What Charles intended as an internal adjustment was now disrupting the very causes the monarchy claimed to protect. Catherine withdrew from every meeting, private briefing, and public plan connected to the Crown Legacy Trust. The fund supported long-term charitable projects and royal initiatives, but she refused to lend her name to decisions she could no longer influence. That refusal mattered because many organizations had trusted her personal involvement, not merely the promise of palace money. Staff began postponing grant announcements and beneficiary visits within hours. Sir Adrian Pembroke had not been confirmed, yet no one knew who could approve the next step. Catherine would not pretend the arrangement remained unchanged, and the uncertainty left charities trapped between expectation and silence. Every delay made the hidden dispute more real. Catherine received a handwritten message from the director of a family support center later that afternoon. The woman asked whether promised funding for vulnerable parents remained secure. She read the note twice, then held it against the papers before her. Her eyes filled, not because her own position had weakened, but because innocent families were now paying for a struggle they had never created. Charles reacted with anger when an aide informed him that several projects could not proceed. The king demanded to know why the schedule had collapsed so quickly. Yet when the official suggested placing another royal in Catherine's chair, he rejected the idea at once. He understood what he had refused to admit. Her trust with those organizations could not be transferred like an appointment. Pembroke then contacted the palace through a formal written message. The proposed trustee warned that he would withdraw unless his independence was guaranteed, exactly as drafted. His demand forced Charles toward a brutal choice. The monarch could defend the secret structure and risk deepening the fracture, or abandon it and appear to surrender under pressure. William tightened the deadlock. The prince told senior officials that he would not authorize the Wales name, household staff, or public resources under the new arrangement. His decision effectively froze the trust's visible operations, and he made clear that Catherine would not stand alone. The paralysis left Charles with nowhere to hide. He requested a private meeting with Catherine at Windsor, with no advisors, no documents, and no one else to absorb the pain between them. For the first time since the crisis began, the king was no longer preparing to defend a decision. He was preparing to face the woman it had wounded. Charles and Catherine met in a small Windsor sitting room, with no secretaries outside the door, and no official papers waiting on the table. He had asked William not to attend. She had agreed only after making clear that she would not negotiate away the principles at stake. For nearly a minute, neither spoke. Then Charles admitted what no formal meeting had allowed him to say. Her challenge at Windsor had made him feel that his own family no longer trusted his judgment. Charles spoke slowly, without the protection of advisors. He said the proposed appointment had grown from fear that competing royal households would divide the late Queen's legacy and pull the trust in different directions. A royal household meant the staff, advisors, and official structure serving a senior member of the family. The king believed that if too many voices gained control, his authority would weaken during a sensitive transition. Catherine listened without interrupting. She acknowledged the pressure he carried, and the burden of protecting an institution already facing change. But she told him fear could not justify excluding the person expected to carry much of the trust's work into the future. Her role was not symbolic. Families, charities, and staff depended on her decisions, and secrecy had placed every promise at risk. Charles finally admitted the wound beneath the argument. Catherine's growing public influence sometimes made him feel the monarchy was moving beyond him before his reign had truly settled. He had waited most of his life to lead, yet each transfer of responsibility felt like another sign that the future was arriving too quickly. Catherine answered with equal honesty. She had never wanted his position. She wanted his confidence. She told Charles that the secrecy had devastated her, because she had spent years believing loyalty would be met with honesty, even during disagreement. He looked away, and for once, the king offered no defense. Charles then revealed that Sir Adrian Pembroke's appointment had never been completed. The monarch still possessed the authority to withdraw it immediately. He asked Catherine what arrangement she would consider fair, not as a gesture of surrender, but as a path forward. Catherine proposed a 3-person trustee panel. 1 seat would belong to an independent financial expert, 1 to a representative chosen by Charles, and 1 to a representative selected jointly by William and herself. Major decisions would require 2 signatures, preventing any single person from controlling the trust. Charles accepted. He halted Pembroke's sole appointment and summoned his legal advisor. Yet the decision created another danger. The palace now had to explain why the original appointment had vanished before it was publicly announced. The private breakthrough restored a measure of trust, yet the monarchy still had to survive the public discovery that such a fracture had existed at all. The story escaped before the palace could shape it. By sunrise, Britain was staring at a newspaper front page, dominated by Catherine's expression beside the words, "The trust she was denied." Broadcasters framed the dispute as a battle over the future direction of the monarchy, while crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace holding signs of support. A private wound had become a national argument about loyalty, power, and whether the crown respected its most dependable figures. Charles faced the consequences almost immediately. Newsrooms had obtained details showing that he had tried to install a sole trustee without consulting Catherine, and palace officials could no longer dismiss the matter as internal routine. The governance of the Crown Legacy Trust, meaning the rules deciding who controls its money and decisions, was now under formal review. That admission mattered because it confirmed the dispute had reached the highest level of the monarchy. Commentators split sharply. One side defended the king's right to protect royal control and argued that a monarch could not allow every family disagreement to become a veto. The other side pointed to Catherine's years of work, her public promises, and her close ties to the charities involved. To them, consultation was not a favor. It was the minimum respect owed to the person whose name carried the trust's credibility. Catherine watched the coverage from home and felt the crisis widening beyond her control. Her distress deepened when reporters began naming beneficiary organizations and questioning whether their funding remained safe. She immediately instructed her team to protect those groups from further attention. The princess refused to let vulnerable families become evidence in a palace battle, even when defending them strengthened her own position. Charles saw the public reaction on television. Supporters stood outside Buckingham Palace carrying photographs of Catherine and signs praising her loyalty. The king did not respond with anger. He became quiet. The footage showed him something advisors could not soften. The public associated her with steadiness, compassion, and trust, and they believed she had been treated unfairly. The evening broadcast made the crisis impossible to contain. Outside Windsor Castle, a correspondent held up the leaked memorandum while the screen displayed the clause granting Sir Adrian Pembroke independent authority. The words confirmed that he could have acted without Catherine or William, and the revelation shifted debate into outrage. The palace finally issued a statement confirming that the sole trustee proposal had been withdrawn and that a shared governance arrangement would replace it. Yet the announcement did not settle the deeper issue. The headlines exposed the fracture, but only the king's final action could determine whether the monarchy emerged, weakened by betrayal or strengthened by accountability. The verdict arrived not through another leak, but through a decision signed openly. Charles formally canceled the sole appointment, approved the three-member trustee panel, and restored Catherine's role in shaping every project connected to her public mission. Yet the true resolution was not contained in legal wording. It came when the king placed the new document before her, acknowledged that he had mistaken secrecy for strength, and asked her to return not as a symbol, but as a trusted partner. Charles made the outcome unmistakable. Sir Adrian Pembroke's appointment was permanently withdrawn, the independent panel was formally created, and Catherine received guaranteed consultation rights over every funding decision, strategy, and program connected to her name. The trustee panel meant 3 people would share control rather than allowing one person to dominate the trust. That change mattered because it protected the charities from sudden interference and protected her work from being used without her consent. Charles also ordered that every future change to the Crown Legacy Trust must include written consultation with both the monarch and the Prince and Princess of Wales. Written consultation meant no one could later claim that approval had been assumed or that silence counted as agreement. The king had closed the very path he had once tried to use. Charles handed Catherine the revised document himself. He offered no excuse and blamed no advisor. "I should have spoken to you before I allowed fear to make the decision for me," he said. The admission carried more weight than the signature because he finally named the real failure. It had not been poor procedure. It had been broken trust. Catherine accepted the apology, but she refused to soften the lesson. She told him trust could not be restored by papers alone. It had to be proven whenever disagreement became uncomfortable, especially when power made silence easier than honesty. Charles listened, and this time he did not interrupt. William understood that her stand had changed more than one appointment. Catherine had established that loyalty inside the modern monarchy could not mean obedience without question. The prince saw that honest challenge was not disloyalty. It was protection against decisions driven by fear. Charles's reversal was not defeat. It was leadership finally stripped of pride. By correcting himself publicly, he preserved the trust, repaired his relationship with Catherine, and stopped private insecurity from becoming lasting institutional damage. Catherine returned to the postponed charity meeting and took the once empty chair. Charles's approval rested beside her briefing book, but her attention remained on the families the trust existed to serve. What began as a secret attempt to control the future ended as a public lesson in accountability, leaving Catherine respected, Charles humbled, and the monarchy more honest than before. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.